When she told me she was taking a break from our marriage to go to Tokyo, something in me shifted, quietly, imperceptibly. I didn't argue or question her. I simply nodded, forced a smile that stopped short of my eyes, and let her excitement wash over the room like warm sunlight through an open window. She'd been planning this trip for months, poring over guidebooks and maps, memorizing the names of shrines, sushi bars, and glowing city streets. It was as if this imagined escape could somehow dissolve the unspoken tension that had grown between us. I watched her pack with a strange mixture of admiration and unease. When we first met, we'd dreamed of exploring the world together, chasing moments and building a life made of shared adventures. But as I stood there, I realized how foreign our own home had become. Once she left, the apartment felt unfamiliar, emptier than any city she could visit. I didn't break down, didn't lash out. I did what I always did when left alone. I watched, thought, and let the silence fill the space she'd vacated. The quiet spoke louder than any fight could have. It wasn't suffocating, it was honest. That honesty revealed things words had failed to express. She chased movement, while I stayed anchored. I found meaning in stillness, in the quiet kind of loyalty that doesn't demand recognition. As the days blurred into quiet evenings, reflection became inevitable. I replayed small moments of our life, times when I'd waited, when she'd forgotten, when laughter had shifted elsewhere. With every recollection, truth took root more deeply. She hadn't left out of malice, but because she had evolved into someone who needed something different, while I remained steady, someone she had perhaps stopped seeing. By the time she returned from Tokyo, I had changed too. The apartment looked the same, but the air inside it was not. I had spent those days not stewing in resentment but sharpening my sense of self. Each hour had carved a clearer outline of what I could no longer accept. She came through the door smiling, her face glowing from adventure, unaware that the version of me she'd left behind no longer existed. Her smile faltered as she sensed it, the subtle rearrangement of energy, the stillness that no longer waited for her. There was no anticipation, no notes left behind, no messages or attempts to draw her back. When she finally returned, her eyes met mine, and for the first time, she didn't see the man who had always bent to her moods. Instead, she saw someone who had quietly grown while she was gone. She expected relief, maybe longing, but what she found was calm. I greeted her with a simple nod, mentioned her trip as if it were a passing detail, and allowed the silence between us to speak louder than any confrontation could. She tried to bridge that silence with stories, temples, night markets, neon skies, and the hum of Tokyo. But her words hung in the air, desperate to recover the attention she once commanded. I listened, yes, but without leaning forward, without the spark she had counted on. The space between us had shifted. It wasn't filled with resentment or conflict, but with balance, finally restored. She began to notice what she had once overlooked: the neatly folded laundry, the open books, the stillness that had replaced the waiting. The rhythm of my days had continued undisturbed, unshaken by her absence. Nothing about the apartment had changed, yet everything had. There was no scene, no bitterness, only a quiet certainty that life had moved on. By the end of the evening, she understood that the world she assumed had paused in her absence had instead kept moving, and I had been the one moving it forward. My eyes held no anger, no disappointment, just a steady calm that revealed more than any explanation could. I no longer needed her presence to feel complete. I had stopped seeking permission to live fully. She searched for traces of the man she used to know, the one who would wait, ache, and yield, but he was gone. My composure said everything. Her vivid stories began to fade, their brilliance dulled against the quiet assurance of my own life continuing. Eventually, she tried to explain, to apologize, to confess in halting words, but they carried no weight anymore. They echoed into a space that no longer required answers. I listened with quiet understanding, and she began to see what her absence had cost. Life doesn't freeze for anyone. She learned that in the silence she once thought she controlled. I had kept moving, steadily, freely, with purpose. And in that calm, the truth settled between us. When someone chooses to pause, you don't wait. You grow. You move forward. You become. And by the time they return, they may find that what they left behind no longer waits for them at all.